didn't know about Bath. Bath was one of the cities that we got to see besides London, because we did stay in London, and we just included some fun facts about Bath. Nicolas Cage owned a £4 million house on Millionaire's Row on the Circus, and then he went bankrupt. So our tour guide decided to give us that fun fact. But the Royal Crescent was bombed in World War II, and it received a lot of damage. So the most seriously affected houses were number 2 and number 17. And another fun fact after we saw Jane Austen's museum was that her house is now a dentist office. Those are the pictures of the Royal Crescent. The structure is a line of 30 residential houses, and they're laid in the shape of a crescent. They were designed by architect John Wood the Younger between 1764 and 1767. And some of the homes were turned into a hotel, museum, offices, and many of the buildings are used for several TV, movies. Now, the pigs. This makes me laugh because I saw different pig structures designed in different ways, and so I asked our tour guide, what's up with the pigs? And so she let me know that there was a contest where many people had entered designing various visions about these pigs, just flowers and all these intricate designs. So the myth is that in the year 863 BC, Lodud, which is the king of the Britons, he contracted leprosy, and he realized that being an imperfect prince, he could never become king. So he left home, became a swine herd, and he traveled to like an untraveled part of the country. And one day his pigs contracted leprosy as well, and they miraculously were cured after they rolled in this hot mud around the baths. So observing the cure, he decided he was going to bathe in the hot murky water as well. And he triumphantly returned and home and became king.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the ballrooms and the assembly rooms, which, yeah. So Bath is one of my favorite cities because I've always been like interested in like reading about and learning more about like the Roman baths that were there. So as I said before, it was famed for its Roman baths and its Georgian architecture. And Bath was also, during Jane Austen's time, the leading center of like posh, fashionable life in England. And it was almost like a socialite's haven. And then in this picture, that depicts like this gorgeous, there's like 3 gorgeous chandeliers in this giant ballroom. And it's the largest 18th century room in Bath, and it measures 105 feet long, 42 feet wide, and 42 feet high. And it hosted up to 1,000 people at social dances and social gatherings. And during Jane Austen's time, balls were held in it at least twice a week, attracting up to 1,200 guests at a time. And during this time, dancing at the balls began promptly at 6 with the minuets, and then later on at 8 p.m. there'll be like country dances, and then all music stopped at 11, even if it was the middle, even if they were like, even if it was in the middle of a song. And balls were held twice a week and attracted from 800 to 1,200 guests at the height of the season. And since social mingling was so popular in this fashionable city, the 2 major ballrooms, known as the upper rooms and the lower rooms, held dances on different evenings so that visitors in Jane Austen's era would have a chance to attend every night. So, and that was, the chandelier depicted the upper rooms, which was also designed by John Younger the Wood as well. So, as I said before, Bath was pretty much known as a rendezvous for the upper echelons, the aristocratic members of Georgian society. And during the 1800s, the city became known as a center for gambling and fashion, along with manners and lifestyles. And then it also attracted this like reputation of being like a who's who of 18th century society. And while she lived in Bath, Jane Austen knew the city as a thriving spa resort, and now it's known as pretty much the same thing, but also a place with great shopping, dining, museums, and just a great time to be had by all tourists.
We had some runaway shoppers in there.
Runaway shoppers
Everywhere. I was being nice.
So, Bath in relation to Jane Austen's works, she said two of her 6 published novels, Northanger Abbey and Persuasion and Bath. And, for example, Catherine Morland in Northanger Abbey makes her social debut in Bath. And also, Bath plays an important role in Persuasion, as Sir Eliot decides to relocate there with financial problems, force his family out of their ancestral homes. It's also the place where Anne Elliot declares her undying love for Frederick.
Okay, so my favorite part about our trip to Bath was the trip to the Jane Austen Museum because she's my favorite author. So I'm just going to give you some details about some of the things that we saw when we were in the museum. We were lucky enough to have high tea in the Jane Austen Museum, and we had a delicious chocolate cake, which we got the last of it, and Professor Zanfini was very gracious. There was only enough pieces for us, and she let us have them. That was probably my favorite part of the trip, but we all had different teas and cappuccinos, and Mr. Darcy was supposed to come to tea with us, but he had some business at Pemberley, but we still had a good time anyway. But there are 2 types of tea. There is high tea and low tea, and the aristocrats and the upper wealthy class had the type of tea that we had. It was just pastries and little snacks in the middle of the day. But the more common type of tea that was had was tea with the lower middle classes, and they had that as their main meal of the day. They had different meats, and it was very filling. They had vegetables, dessert, the whole ordeal. Another part of the Jane Austen Museum that was really great was we saw a lot of the original letters that Jane and Cassandra shared. Unfortunately, Jane burned all the letters that Cassandra sent to her, but Cassandra saved some of the letters that Jane left her. And it's from these letters that we know a lot about their lives. When they wrote letters, they wrote on large pieces of paper, and they divided them into 4 pieces, and they left one blank so that they could address it. But that's one of the letters up there, and as you can see, they wrote all over it on the sides and everything just so that they could save paper. I think one of my other favorite parts of the museum was when we learned the language of the fan. And most people thought that fans were just for decoration back in the time, but they actually used them to send secret messages to the men that they were talking to. And up there, I'm symboling for I love you. Marissa's is a little different. She's saying follow me. And Stephanie has my favorite one, which is my love for you is breaking my heart.
So the next part of the trip was when we went to see Oscar Wilde's house on Tite Street, and it was a little bit different because we couldn't go in. It's a private residence, which you can actually lease if you feel the need to live where Oscar Wilde lived. And it was really cold that day, just as many of the days, but Oscar Wilde lived there with his wife and his 2 sons, Vivian and Cyril, until he was imprisoned for sodomy. And he wrote many of his great works there, including The Picture of Dorian Gray and The Importance of Being Praised. In the early years, while he lived in London, he also traveled to America and Paris and different places, and he was known for being a very flamboyant aesthete, which is a supporter of the arts and fashion and just all things grandiose. And he was known for writing very comedic, lighthearted works, and it was also during this time that he began a relationship with Bosie, which eventually brought about his downfall. And he's extremely infamous for the trials that took place surrounding his life. Bosie's father, the Marquis de Queensberry, accused him of being a sodomite, and Wilde, not willing to back down, decided to go to trial and to try and fight against him. And he was actually convicted, and it led to more trials, and that's eventually what led to him being convicted and sent to jail. Reading Jail was too far away for us to travel, but we did go see Old Bailey. And Old Bailey apparently does not like tourists because they don't let you in if you have cell phones or cameras or anything of the sort. So we had another lecture in a really cold place about the Victorian penal system and punishment system. And after he was imprisoned, Wilde was never the same. He suffered many injuries there from the harsh abuse and he just never really recovered. And he actually left London once he was released from prison, and he lived out the rest of his life in Paris, very sickly. And that's when he started to write The Ballad of Reading Jail and De Profundis, which he addressed to Bosie, and it was his letters from prison. And The Ballad of Reading Jail serves as a commentary for the Victorian prison system because he talks about the harsh treatment and how they really just didn't care about the prisoners and the punishment never really fit the crime.